Hello, welcome to the studio. Well, I promised you the next video would be printing my dry point plate, and that's exactly what you've got. So today I'm printing my dry point plate that I made last week at home with a jam jar. This is how I made dry points during lockdown. I do tend to use a press these days, but this is a perfectly good way to do a dry point etching print. If you like the video, do please click like, subscribe to the channel. You can see lots more of my work, and you can also buy my self-paced video courses at ruthander.co.uk. So pop along there if that's what you want. So this is my printing setup. I've got my plate here. I've covered the table in plastic so that because it can get pretty messy. So if you're doing this on a dining room table or something, probably cover it up. Lots of newspaper, scrap paper, some tissue paper, some etching paper. So I tend to use Somerset satin, but you can use any etching paper or thick printing paper. I've got my jam jar with a ridge on the bottom, if you can see that kind of ridged bottom, and that's what I use to apply pressure and print, as you'll see. But you could use like a rolling pin or anything that's kind of like quite hard that you can apply a lot of pressure. I've got black etching ink, or this is actually called dry point ink, but it's basically the same stuff. Got a little bit of extender as well, just to kind of make it a bit more gloopy and easier to work with. And then I've got some scrim here, which is called, or muslin. It's kind of like rough material, but you could use rags if you've just got any rags. That can also work really well. This is just quite good stuff. All of these things you can get from intaglioprintmaker.com or .co.uk, and certainly online wherever you are, I'm sure. So I'm going to start printing. One more thing that I haven't shown you is that I have some etching paper soaking in some water there. And the idea is that you soak that for at least 10 minutes, maybe 20, and it gets very soft and the fibres will push into the plate there when you apply pressure. Right, let's get printing. Okay, so what I tend to use is a sort of a cardboard spatula to put ink onto my plates. But you can also use, what's quite useful is an old toothbrush to really get the ink into your scratches. I'm going to put this ink all over my plate, or over quite a lot of it. Because what we're going to do is like wipe it off, and we can leave some ink on if we want to, like a kind of monoprint if we want to do that. So just pop it on like that. If you wanted to, and especially with this first print, because it doesn't always, the ink doesn't always get into the scratches, you can just kind of use an old toothbrush to kind of make sure, just gently working it into your scratches that you've made. And then I'm just going to use some newspaper to take off the excess ink. On here. So get as much off the surface as you can. You can see it starting to come off now, because the wiping aspect of it can take quite a while, and the more you get off, the better. So I've just got this piece of scrim. I've just kind of made it into a little ball. I'm starting with quite a dirty piece of scrim because we're just getting the excess off first, really. And what we do is we gently wipe, and we're going to wipe one way, get a sort of cleanish bit, and wipe the other way. So we don't want to kind of wipe away the burr or the scratch. We don't want to wipe the ink from the scratch. Let's see if I can get a bit more out of that. But we do want to get the ink from the surface, just that flat surface there. So I'll be interested to see if some of the marks, the older marks that I printed before, will come out. We shall see when it prints. Okay, so you can see now that the lines are starting to appear. The scratch lines are starting to appear. They're coming out of the darkness as we wipe. It's a bit like photography, this, as in, you know, when things develop. So I'm just going to use a cleaner piece now of the scrim to start getting most of it off. I'm going to take quite a lot of the ink off this time around because I'm just showing you how to do it, but you could leave quite a lot of that ink on, and perhaps in another video I will show you that. So I'm just gently moving in different directions over my scratch marks. Okay. Right, I'm just going to move that out of the way for a second because I'm going to show you what I do with the paper. So what I do, I've got my wet paper here. I've actually just used one of those shower scrapers to get a bit of excess water off. But then I'm going to put it between some newspaper, or if you've got blotting paper, even better. And we're going to take the excess water off. We don't want it too wet, we want it damp really rather than wet. I think that should do the trick. I might just get a bit more on there. Okay, so we've now got a nice damp piece of paper. Make sure your surface is fairly clean. What I should have probably done is put some newspaper down before I inked up my plate, but there we go. Okay, so then we go plate, paper, damp paper. Okay, this is a piece of Mark Resist, I think, but you could use any type of shiny plastic, and it's just to allow your printing implement, in this case a jam jar, to move over the surface of the paper easily. So sometimes cereal packets work well, the insides of cereal packets, which this is the same kind of stuff. Mark Resist, which this is, Mylar, which is probably a brand name, but it's basically plastic. Any kind of thin plastic that is going to allow your implement to move easily over your paper, because what I'm doing here, and I'm sorry about the wobble, is I'm pushing down really quite hard, very hard in fact. I don't know if you can see that, but you can actually see the marks where the ridges of the jam jar is pushing into the paper, and that's what we want actually. We want the paper to literally be pushed, the fibres of the paper to be pushed into the scratches. So normally if you were doing this with a press, printing presses have a vast amount of pressure, that's what they're good for, and they would do that job for you, and they would do it quickly and well. But if you haven't got a press, then we have to push the fibres of the paper into our scratches. And you have to make sure that you've covered your whole plate, or at least where you've made your marks. So it does take a bit of muscle power, this. So you can imagine if you've got a really big plate, it can take quite a bit of time, quite a bit of muscle power. Need some biceps and triceps for this. Okay, I'm going to see how that looks. I'm just going to hold it down with one hand and gently peel away. Here we go. Right, and that is our dry point. So the older marks have shown up actually. And this was where I used the metal brush, I think, and the roulette, and then this is where I scratched into my plate. So that is how to print a dry point plate at home.